Hello everyone. In our previous video, we inserted data into a supplier table using an insert operation in the adapter. It is not a widely accepted practice to insert data into a table or tables using insert operation. Instead, Oracle PL/SQL provides features such as package, specification, and body, wherein the logic rests on the database better. PL/SQL package can insert data into multiple tables and subsequently call COTS APIs to further enhance the functionality in Oracle EBS. In this video, we will create a database adapter to call Oracle package, which will insert data into multiple tables. The summary of the steps that we plan to do as part of this video include creating a supplier and address tables in the database, create an Oracle PL/SQL object and package to insert data, create a WSDL based upon XSD, add a DBAdapter which calls this Oracle database package, and add a BPL process which is connected to the WSDL to transform the input and send the data to a DBAdapter to populate data into the tables. I am now in SQL Developer and we are creating the tables in the sequences. The first one is create table XX supplier info. I have dropped the table that we created in the previous video, and you see here I am adding a few more columns. SOA flow ID. I'll explain you later of what we are going to do with this column. And I have added some columns to identify who created these records and when was it date the records were created. So this is create table XX supplier info. I see that the table is created, and then I am creating the table for storing the addresses, which is this, and this table has all the address type and all this related columns along with the who columns. And the next one is we are creating a sequence for this for the table to populate the supplier ID over here, and we are creating a sequence to populate the address ID in the address table. So as you see here, the table was created. The tables were created and the sequences were created too. Now we are creating a package in the package specification in the database. As you see here, we are creating a type which is XX supplier TBL. It's a table of XX supplier info and indexed by binary integer. And there is XX supplier address table, which is a table of XX supplier address info. We have a procedure, load staging procedure, which basically takes a supplier table and address table as inputs, and it will return a status and then description of the status as part of these two parameters that you see here. In the package body, we have the same procedure, and we are having an exception handler, and we have some local variables that are defined. I am trying to put the date as sysdate and created by as 1111. So the first thing we do is we are looping through the records of the supplier table. Ideally, we will have only one record of supplier that comes in, and this inserts into XX supplier info, supplier ID, and the SOA flow ID and all other columns. And in the address table, we will have supplier address info, which will have the supplier ID, address type, address 12, city, and everything. And I'm using a curve val to populate the supplier ID and a next val to populate the supplier address table. The rest of all the data will stay same, and we are trying to populate all the address related information in the various columns. And if there is an exception, we are sending an red code as 1. And if it is some unhandled exception, we send it as 2, and if it is success, we send it as 0. And I am committing the transactions at the end of the transaction, and I will be rolling back if there is an exception. I create the package, and then I create the package body. JDeveloper, and we will create a SOA project. File, new, file, new, project. and I'll choose a SOA project. This time I'll enter the project name as supplier information, because we may not be only inserting but also doing other DML operations on the table. So I'll name it as supplier information here. And I'll just create an empty composite. The first thing that we do is normally create an XSD. So as of now, I'll use the same XSD that we created in the previous lecture. I'll name this as supplier.xsd and namespace as SOA-learning.org. I have actually prepared the supplier.xsd in the background, and the supplier.xsd is basically the same XSD that we had in our previous project, except that now I have a few more elements grouped better. The reason is that we basically want to see multiple addresses being entered for a single supplier, and we need to have an option to do so. Hence you see an address information that is added over here, and this address information has all the elements that we initially had for the addresses. And we basically want to loop through all this address information in a transformation and be able to insert multiple addresses for a single supplier as part of our transformation. So I'll now create an WSDL out of the XSD that we just created. Insert SOAP service, and I name this as supplier. The WSDL URL, I am choosing to create a WSDL from the schema. So I generate a WSDL from the schema, and as you see here, I'll make the operation, I'll leave the operation as execute, and let us make it as a synchronous interface. And the input, I'll choose the input here, and the output, over here. I say OK. So as you see here, the supplier.WSDL is created, which is connected to the supplier.xsd schema. Now I create a BPL process. As of now, I'll say it's a no service, and I'll say OK. And I'll connect this service to this. I'll just use the default one. See. Now in the external references section, I'll create a database adapter. Insert database. In this case, I'm using a call a stored procedure or function instead of perform an operation on a table. I choose the schema as SOA learning. I put the procedure as and click on browse. So as you see here, the API is loaded now. I say OK. And this is very important. Now when we create an DBAdapter with a package as a reference, there are more additional objects that are created, which we will see in a minute. And I prefer to name this as SOA_supplier package. And I'll choose this option and say next. I'll keep all the defaults, everything the same. And as you see here, you have finished defining the database adapter service supplier database. When you click finish, the wizard will create the file in your project directory. An XSD file which contains a schema for the procedures arguments will also be created. And there are more objects that are created: the wrapper procedure, the wrapper package, schema, and SQL files, and the drop file. We'll examine these files in a minute. So once the database adapter is created, we are going to wire this dbuild process to the database adapter. And let us examine the files that were created when we created this database adapter. So if you remember, we had in the previous lecture also we had seen how a WSDL was created for the database that we had. So that is the supplier database.WSDL that you see here. And then there was an XSD schema which was created for the corresponding package. So if you see, there are a couple of types that were created. We'll come back to, we'll review those types in the next file that we are going to look through. And each of the file will have information of what are the different objects over there. So if you see this file, this type has these columns, and this type has these columns, and all this information are present over here. So let us now examine the package. This is very important here, because when we create a database adapter, if you remember, let me open my database adapter code. Earlier we had the code like this. We had an XX supplier table and address table. So these tables were part of this load staging procedure and were part of this XX supplier integration package. So if we review the same file now in the JDeveloper, we have a type. Basically, this is for the supplier header information. This type is for the supplier address information. This is a table of this type, and this is a table of, I'll show you this. Let me move the cursor down. So x1, x13 is this. So this create or replace type is a table of this type, and this is a table of x1, x2, which is this type. And now a package is created. This package will have reference of all the columns that you find in the table, and in the package body you will see that there is a integration package $1. This is created automatically by SOA, and this is in fact calling the actual package that we have created to insert data into the table. I'm running this query now. This query is a query that I wrote just now after the objects were created, and it will show that all these are database types that we just now reviewed. All of them are valid. There's a package that is valid, and there's a package body that is valid too. So let us now go into the supplier dbuild process and add some logic, orchestration logic onto the dbuild process. Let us now create an additional schema which will help us pass some additional values if need be for the database/reporting purposes. JDeveloper complies during transformation if you use simple XSD types to map from source to target, and this XSD is going to help us resolve that problem. I am clicking now on the schemas, new XML schema. I name this as generic information.xsd, and the namespace is SOA-DBAdapter. I copied this XSD from my notepad, and let me explain you in the design section. We have custom input and a custom output elements, and the custom input has a flow ID, composite name, source transaction ID, flow ID, composite name, status code, status description, and the custom output. This flow ID that you see here is what we are trying to populate as SOA flow ID in the table that we created earlier, and that is the reason we are having it as an XSDs element. In case we are directly trying to map it as Aura composite instance ID to or Aura flow ID to this flow ID, transformation will not allow us to do that. But instead, if we map it to an XML schemas element, there are no complaints from the transformation later. I'll save this, and we will use this in the rest of the BPL process to populate the information that we need to populate a table and go further. Let us now create an additional schema which will help us pass some additional values if need be for the database/reporting purposes. JDeveloper complies during transformation if we use simple XSD types to map from source to target, and this XSD is going to help us resolve that problem. I am clicking now on the schemas, new XML schema. I name this as generic information.xsd, and the namespace is SOA-DBAdapter. I copied this XSD from my notepad, and let me explain you in the design section. We have custom input and a custom output elements, and the custom input has a flow ID, composite name, source transaction ID, flow ID, composite name, status code, status description, and the custom output. This flow ID that you see here is what we are trying to populate as SOA flow ID in the table that we created earlier, and that is the reason we are having it as an XSDs element. In case we are directly trying to map it as Aura composite instance ID to or Aura flow ID to this flow ID, transformation will not allow us to do that. But instead, if we map it to an XML schemas element, there are no complaints from the transformation later. I'll save this, and we will use this in the rest of the BPL process to populate the information that we need to populate a table and go further. Now we are in the BPL process, and let us add a few activities into this BPL process. The first activity that we will add is a receive activity. A reply activity will be the last activity, but I'm going to add it now. We will have an assign activity. Let us have a transform activity. We need to invoke the DB adapter, so we'll have an invoke activity. We need to assign the output that comes from the database into the reply variable. So let me add one more assign activity. I think this is pretty much what we may need for us to work and do what we are supposed to be doing as part of this project. Let me save this record as of now, and let us go and visit each of these activities now. So receive activity, as you see, I'll change the name of the receive activity as receive input. I use this checkbox. I check on this checkbox, create instance, and in the partner link I am going to choose supplier, as we want to get the input from the supplier in the receive activity. And in the variable I am going to just choose the receive input variable that we see and click on OK. I save the record. So the next activity is assign, and next activity is assign, as I said, and the first thing we are going to do is to create a variable which will be of the new XSD that we created. So I'll name this as var custom input. I choose it as an element, and here I go to project schema files, generic information, and I choose the custom input tag. Okay. and then I create one more variable where custom output element, and I choose this custom output. In the assign, I now want to assign a flow ID. What I do is I right click here and I choose expression, and here I type something like this, or get flow. So what this means basically is that we are having a unique flow instance ID, which we also call sometimes as composite ID, which is a unique way to identify the composite that is the composite number that is generated in the SOA instance. This is pretty synonymous with what you already know as a primary key in your tables, and if you have supplier ID, you will have a unique supplier ID every time you create a supplier. In the same way that whenever the SOA project is called, there will be unique ID that will be created by the SOA server, and this get flow ID is basically going to help us get that value. So this is a way we can connect the data from connect data from SOA to the Oracle database. Assuming you want to query you want to see the payload of a transaction that has come into the database, and you want to reproduce some issue later, you will write a query, select stuff from this supplier table where the supplier name is this, and you'll get the flow ID from there, and you can come and query back this flow ID back in SOA, and you can see what is the payload and debug it better. I prefer having this ID always as one of the columns in the table in tables that I design, and I think it's a good practice too. There are other ways to also identify and search transactions, which we will touch base either in this video or in the later video during our future sessions. I'll now click on OK. And the composite name ideally we are not using as of now, so I'll leave all this as is, and I click on OK. And let me change this as assign custom input. The next activity that I would like to look at is the invoke activity. Let me change the name as invoke DB, and I'll choose the partner link as supplier database, and here I'll choose the input as and the output. I'll create two variables, input and output, and I say okay. So all the variables that you are creating here, like for example receive input and the invoke input, everything that you see here ideally can be seen also at this place. It's at the BPL process level. You see the receive input here, the invoke DB and the invoke DB output, and you see the message. These are all of type message types because they are all pointing to the partner links, and these are types of element or of type element. The one you see here, where custom input and where custom output, which is of type the XML schema element. I'll save the record now here. Let us now assign the output also, the output reply that comes. Let me do assign output. In the assign output, I am going to assign the invoke DB's output parameters that you see here, airbuff and red code to, okay, before that I need to create a variable for reply. So let me create a reply variable. So reply output, and I choose a partner link as supplier again, and let us create this variable, and okay. And this assign output now makes sense, wherein we are going to assign the output from the database, the airbuff and the red code, to the reply variable that you see, which is basically the status, the description. So I'll put the red code as the status this, and airbuff as the status description. Okay, save, and we are at a point transformation, and let us now look at how the transformation works. Now we are in the transformation activity, and the transformation activity, the two things that we are going to see here is the source and the target variables. The source and the target variables that you see. Our source is going to be from two variables basically. It is going to be from the receive input, because we have all the data that comes from the payload, and I'll say okay. And the other variable that we are going to use is the var custom input. As you know, we have the SOA flow ID that we had assigned in the previous step. That is var custom input over here. And the target variable, as you probably guessed now, is going to be our invoke DB supplier database input variable. Say okay, and I say transform DB input. We can even do an assign activity for each of the elements, but assign will not work if we want to do it in a loop, and hence we would rather go with a transformation, so we can do a loop and insert multiple addresses if the data comes so into the address table. I click on this plus button, create mapping. Okay, this is my transformation design window. There is a source window too. We'll go and visit the source window in a bit. Before that, let us go to the design window. So the design window, as you see here, I'll expand on both the sides. On the supplier table, this is the supplier database variable that we actually added, and this is the address information on the input. So this is basically the receive input. This is the custom input where we have the SOA flow ID being assigned, and we have the database related columns over here, TNS, P supplier, TBL item, the supplier table. If you remember, we had created this table earlier in our video. And now let me go to the supplier name. Let me map the header elements first. I'll map that supplier to supplier name, DUNS number, and TIN number, and I'll map this flow ID that we have to the supplier SOA flow ID, and we will now go and map the address information. So the address information is as you see, it could be multiple addresses, so we may have to do a for loop of it. We will have to do a for loop of it. So what I'll do is I'll click on this P address TBL item and right click here, and I say add XSL instruction and for each, and as you see there is a for each added, and I'll go and connect this address information to this address TBL item. Let me connect it here. You can ignore this message for now, because I think this is not relevant in our case. So let me take this address information. As you see here, address information is now connected to the for each. And let me go back here. Okay, so now as you see here, this is the address table, and for each address information for each of the address information that comes in the payload, we will be looping through this P address table item, which will assign all the address related elements to the database type. Now let us go back to the design window, and I'm going to assign individual address types here. TNS address type, address 1, address 2, city, state, postal code, and country code. I'll now save this. I believe what we were supposed to do as part of this has been completed now. Let us now go and rebuild the project. Let me quickly check if the assign output was done. Yeah, we had done the assign output, and Let us save this and rebuild this project. The project is built now. Let us deploy the code to the EM. The deployment is finished now. I'm logging into the WebLogic, into the EM console. So I'm going to the target navigation that you see here and I go to SOA, SOA Infra. Deployed composites, and I see the supplier information with the latest timestamp October 11, 2018, 5:19 AM. Click on the supplier information. Let us click on the small icon that says show WSDL and endpoint URI and copy this WSDL. So now I am in SQL Developer and I am running the queries before we execute a test case. And as you see here, I don't have any data in the table. And let us now go to SOAP UI and create a new project. So in SOAP UI, I create a new SOAP project and I enter this as supply information, and I'll paste the WSDL URL that I copied. And okay, let me click on this request one, double click on this request one, and I remove this and will copy the information that I have already prepared on the notepad. And as you see here, I have two addresses. The supplier name is Creative Solutions LLC, have DUNS number and a TIN number, and have two addresses here. One in the supplier has one office in Chicago and other office in Anchorage, Alaska. And I'm going to click on this play button here, and this should send the request to SOA. And as we see here, we are getting a status as 0. Let us now go back to SQL Developer and see if the data is populated. Yes, it is, and the supplier ID, I have been using this for a long time, so the sequence has gone up, and the SOA flow ID 50001 is the same ID that you see over here somewhere. And as you see, the SOA flow ID is 5001 that you see here. And let us go back to SQL Developer. And the rest of the information that we populated are here. And let me run the address information. Here, if you remember, we had done a loop of all the record. So the address type is B&B, business to business addresses. The 123 Main Street and 456 Second Street that we entered in Chicago and Anchorage, and you see here the supplier ID is 21 and the address ID is 21 and 22. So that's pretty much that we wanted to see. We have pretty much achieved what we wanted to see as part of this lecture. To give a quick summary, we created an Oracle database package which inserted data into two tables, a supplier and an address information. And on SOA, and we created a package and we created the types and everything on the database. Later we came to SOA and we created a XSD, we created a WSDL based on an XSD, we created a DB adapter, and later we were able to connect that BPEL process to an DB adapter through invoke operation, and we did some bit of transformation to transform the data, and that's how we were able to see what we are seeing now. We are able to get the data populated into the table in the way we expected it to. I hope you had a good insight on how this is done, and happy learning. If you find time, please go through the video, and don't forget to, and we'll always appreciate to see if you could give a feedback, comments, and if you need these artifacts, please do update your comments and let me know, and I can send the artifacts of the package and the SOA code, everything onto you through an email or some other communication. Thanks and have a nice day.